Have you ever stood before a doorway that seemed less like an entrance and more like a challenge? Imagine it, the desert night in Egypt, where silence stretches so far you can hear your own pulse. Above you, stars scatter across the sky like shards of ancient jewels. But ahead, cut into the cliffside, is a rectangle of darkness. It is nothing more than a gap in stone. Yet every fiber of your being whispers that to step inside is to gamble with your life. This is the doorway to a pharaoh's tomb, and it is said that once you cross the threshold, you do not return unchanged. But before we go further, pause with me just a moment. If you are enjoying the idea of diving into history's deepest mysteries, take 2 seconds, tap the like button. Write in the comments where you are watching from, and subscribe so you will never miss these late-night journeys into the past. Done good, because the sands are shifting, and the tomb is waiting. Step closer. The stone feels cold beneath your hand, though the desert air is still warm. Your flashlight beam wavers, cutting into the blackness beyond. What strikes you first is not sight, but smell, a stale odor, like incense mixed with rot, a scent preserved by time itself. The air here has not been touched in thousands of years. You breathe it, and for a moment you are inhaling the same atmosphere the priests once sealed inside with their king. Your eyes adjust, and shapes emerge on the walls. Jackal-headed Anubis, falcon-eyed Horus, gods painted larger than life, their eyes sharp, their arms raised as though to block your path. Their messages are not subtle. These are guardians, immortal sentinels carved in pigment and stone, saying without words, do not disturb. And their hieroglyphs etched deep into the limestone. They read like poetry to some, but to those who know, they are curses. Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king. Imagine that phrase carved by steady hands under the flicker of oil lamps, whispered in prayer as the workers sealed the tomb. Do you think they believed the curse would work? Or do you think it was a trick designed to scare away thieves, maybe both? But what matters is how you feel as you stand here. Do you feel the weight of those words pressing into your chest? Does the silence feel thicker now? You shine your light deeper. The beam shakes, maybe from your unsteady hand, maybe from something else. The dust in the air glitters as though it, too, is alive. The Egyptians understood fear better than almost anyone. They weaponized it. These tombs were not only built to protect bodies and treasures. They were built to terrify the living. A fearful thief hesitates. A fearful explorer stumbles. And fear itself is the first guardian. Still, curiosity has a way of drowning fear. You take a step inside. The sound of your foot on stone echoes far too loud, bouncing back like a warning. Another step. The darkness swallows you. The air presses heavier. It feels as though you have crossed not just space, but time itself. Behind you is the world of the living. Ahead lies the realm of the dead. Now tell me, if you were standing here just inside this doorway, with the curse written on the walls and the gods staring down at you, would you keep walking, or would you turn back while you still could? To understand why the curse of the pharaoh holds such weight, you must first understand who the pharaohs truly were. To you and me, they might look like figures in history books. Tall crowns, stiff statues, names like Ramses, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun. But to the people of ancient Egypt, they were not just kings, they were gods walking among men. Imagine living in a world where the river that gives you life, the Nile, floods and retreats by forces you cannot control. The sun scorches the desert but makes your crops grow. Death is everywhere, sudden, without reason. In that world, you crave order, someone who stands between you and chaos. And so the pharaoh was not just a ruler. He was Horus made flesh, the falcon soaring above the storm, the beating heart of balance itself. When the pharaoh raised his hand, it was not only law, it was divine will. His voice was believed to echo the will of the gods. Disobeying him was not simply treason. It was blasphemy. His wars were cosmic battles, his victories proof that the gods favored Egypt. And when he died, the story did not end. It merely transformed. In death, he became Osiris, ruler of the underworld. His life and afterlife were threads in the same fabric. That is why the tomb mattered. It was not just a grave. It was a launch pad to eternity. Every object placed inside was deliberate jars of food, amulets of gold, weapons, statues of servants who would spring to life in the afterlife. Even board games were left for entertainment in eternity. Nothing was trivial. Every detail whispered the pharaoh must live forever. Picture the workers carving the walls of a tomb by torchlight. Their chisels spark against stone. Sweat drips down their backs as they carve hymns. Prayers, warnings. They do this not for their own glory but to protect the cosmic balance. And then they leave, sealing the door, knowing no human eyes were ever meant to see this chamber again. Now imagine you are there, centuries later, shining your flashlight over those very walls. You read the hieroglyphs. You see the pharaoh standing tall, enemies kneeling at his feet. He wears the double crown, symbol of ruling both Upper and Lower Egypt. His gaze is calm, almost smug. He does not look like a man who will ever allow himself to be disturbed. That is the weight of the pharaoh's identity. He was not content with a lifetime of rule. He demanded eternity, and when someone dares violate his rest, his curse is not just a threat, it is the extension of his rule beyond death. Even in the grave, he is king. Even in silence, his command still echoes. So ask yourself, if you stood before such a man, part mortal, part god, a ruler who claimed eternity, would you dare to touch his tomb, or would you bow your head and leave him to his endless sleep? Imagine walking through the desert valley where the mountains stand like jagged teeth against the sky. This is not the bustling plateau of Giza with its tourist buses and souvenir sellers. This is the Valley of the Kings, a landscape stripped of sound. The only thing you hear is the crunch of sand beneath your boots and the dry hiss of the wind moving across stone. For thousands of years, this valley has hidden the secrets of the pharaohs. It has no lush vegetation, no water, no sign of life, only silence, a silence so deep it feels alive. The pharaohs chose this place deliberately. They abandoned the giant pyramids, which had become magnets for tomb robbers, and instead cut their graves into the cliffs themselves. Each tomb lies hidden beneath tons of rock, its entrance sealed, its corridors winding downward like veins in the earth. To enter is to descend, not just physically but spiritually, leaving the bright desert world of the living behind. Picture yourself crouching into one of those passageways. The walls are close, the ceiling low, the light from your torch bouncing unevenly across painted surfaces. Hieroglyphs stretch in endless rows, prayers to Ra, maps of the night sky, warnings to intruders. The deeper you go, the heavier the air becomes, until you can almost feel the weight of stone above pressing on your lungs. Now stop and imagine this detail. The builders of these tombs never intended them to be found again. They built false corridors to confuse, traps designed to collapse, shafts filled with rubble. Even the entrance itself was sometimes erased from the surface, disguised so well that the sands themselves swallowed it. When a pharaoh was buried, priests sealed the tomb with rituals and curses, declaring it closed for all eternity. To break inside centuries later is not just theft, it is cosmic trespassing. What makes the valley uncanny is how empty it feels. The heat burns overhead, yet the valley seems hollow, echoing with something unseen. You feel like you are being watched, though the cliffs are bare. Perhaps it is because the ancient Egyptians believed the valley was guarded by spirits. The souls of priests, the wrath of gods, or perhaps the pharaohs themselves still keeping watch. Here's a chilling thought. Many tomb robbers throughout history never returned from the valley. Some were found dead in collapsed shafts, their bodies broken by stone. Others simply vanished, their names lost, their fates unrecorded. Did the desert take them, or was it something else? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine you are one of those robbers, creeping down the tunnel with stolen torches. You grip your sack of loot, gold bracelets, a carved figurine, and suddenly the torch sputters. The walls seem to close in. Behind you, the passage collapses. Ahead, silence swallows everything. What would you do in that moment? Would you call for help that will never come, or would you sit in the darkness? realizing you have joined the Pharaoh in his eternal silence. That is the essence of the valley. It is not only a cemetery, it is a place designed to erase intruders, to pull them into the stillness of the Pharaoh's eternal night. And as you stand in the blazing sun above, or descend into the painted chambers below, the question presses at you, if eternity lies here. Sealed in stone, do you truly want to disturb it? Step deeper into the tomb, and your light falls upon the walls where the Pharaoh's voice still lingers, not in sound, but in carved words. Ancient hieroglyphs stretch like rivers across limestone, each symbol painstakingly cut, painted with pigments of ochre, black, and blue. At first, you might think they are mere decoration, but then you realize they are messages, warnings left for you, the intruder. Egyptian tombs often contained inscriptions known as execration texts. They were not prayers for the dead, but threats against the living. They promised broken bones, blindness, madness, even death to anyone who disturbed the king's rest. Imagine reading those words in flickering torchlight, with the heavy silence pressing down. Even if you did not believe, would not you feel your heart beat faster? One famous curse reads, "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king." Another warns that crocodiles and scorpions will strike the violator. Still others threaten divine retribution, Anubis weighing your heart and finding it lighter than a feather, condemning your soul to oblivion. These warnings were more than superstition. They were psychological weapons designed to terrify before a single trap was sprung. Now imagine you are a tomb robber sneaking in centuries ago. Your torch reveals the words. You know people in your village whisper that curses are real. You know others who dared and never returned. Do you push forward, hands trembling as you reach for gold? Or do you flee, believing that even touching the treasure will doom you? It is important to understand these texts worked. Fear is contagious. One man panics, and soon his whole crew abandons the raid. Stories spread like wildfire. Someone's brother coughed blood. Another dropped dead. Another went mad. Whether coincidence or curse, the result was the same. The Pharaoh slept undisturbed. And yet, the irony is delicious. The words carved to keep men away also attracted them. After all, nothing tempts quite like forbidden treasure. The more terrible the warning, the greater the thrill of defiance. Perhaps the Pharaoh knew this too, that fear alone would not stop everyone. Which is why the tombs also hid physical dangers, traps of stone, shafts of rubble, air sealed for centuries waiting to choke the lungs of intruders. So when you see those words carved deep into rock, ask yourself, were they meant to scare you away, or to invite you deeper, daring you to test your courage? And if you did step forward, would the curse be waiting, or would your own imagination destroy you before anything else could? No tale of the Pharaoh's curse is more famous than that of Tutankhamun, the boy king, dead at 19, entombed with treasures beyond imagination. For more than 3,000 years, his resting place lay sealed beneath the sands of the Valley of the Kings, hidden from robbers, scholars, and even memory itself, until 1922, when an English archaeologist named Howard Carter struck his chisel into stone and found what would be called the greatest archaeological discovery of all time. Picture the moment. Carter peers into the small opening, candle in hand. Lord Carnarvon, his wealthy patron, asks from behind, "Can you see anything?" Carter replies with words that would echo through history. Yes, wonderful things. Gold glimmered in the shadows, chariots, statues, jewelry, even toys the boy once played with. And at the heart of it all, the nested coffins that cradled Tutankhamun himself. But wonder quickly turned to fear. Within months of the discovery, Lord Carnarvon was dead. A mosquito bite became infected, fever raged, and he died suddenly in Cairo. Newspapers declared it the work of the curse. Headlines screamed, "Death comes to those who disturb the king." And then more deaths followed. A string of mysterious illnesses, accidents, heart failures among those connected to the excavation. Was it coincidence, or had the boy king truly reached from beyond the grave? Tutankhamun himself was no ordinary pharaoh. He ruled briefly, during a turbulent time, reversing his father Akhenaten's radical religious changes. His tomb, though small compared to others, was packed with treasure as though to compensate for his short reign. To disturb him was not merely an act of archaeology. It was a violation of a king whose afterlife had only just begun. Imagine yourself as Carter, standing in that chamber, staring at walls stacked with golden shrines. Every shadow seems alive. You know the world is waiting outside for treasures. But here in the silence, you feel eyes on you, eyes painted on statues, eyes carved in gold, eyes of the young king himself. Would you still dare to pry open the coffin? Or would you hesitate, sensing that this discovery carried a cost far greater than gold? And here is the cruelest irony. Tutankhamun's curse, whether real or imagined, gave him more fame in death than he ever knew in life. He was a minor king, barely remembered, yet now, because of the deaths that followed, his name is etched in every museum, his golden mask the face of Egypt itself. The curse, in a way, worked. It made him eternal. If the story of Tutankhamun's tomb was the spark, the death of Lord Carnarvon was the flame that made the world believe. Without it, perhaps the curse would have remained a footnote. But in 1923, the wealthy aristocrat who funded Carter's expedition fell ill and died, and the legend was born. Carnarvon had been present when the tomb was opened, his excitement rivaling Carter's own. But weeks later, he suffered a mosquito bite on his cheek. It became infected, blood poisoning set in, and fever overwhelmed him. Doctors could do little. In the early hours of April 5, 1923, he died. The newspapers erupted. Pharaoh's curse claims first victim screamed the headlines. Journalists spun the tale with feverish delight. They noted that, on the night of Carnarvon's death, all the lights in Cairo went out. They claimed his dog back in England howled and dropped dead at the same moment. Coincidences, perhaps, but to a world hungry for mystery, it was proof enough. Soon, more names were added to the list. Arthur Mace, a member of the excavation team, died suddenly. George J. Gould, an American millionaire who visited the tomb, fell ill and perished. One by one, the deaths piled up. Each obituary whispered the same story. The curse was real. Of course, skeptics argued otherwise. They pointed out that many who entered the tomb lived long lives. Howard Carter himself survived until 1939, nearly 2 decades after the discovery. But by then, the myth was unstoppable. The curse had captured the imagination of the public, cementing itself in movies, books, and fireside stories. Imagine the scene in Cairo at the time. Journalists swarming the hotels, typewriters clattering, locals whispering that the ancient gods had risen. Superstitious guides refused to approach the valley. Tourists both feared and flocked to it. The curse was a paradox, terrifying, yet irresistible. Now place yourself in Carnarvon's shoes. You have spent a fortune chasing treasure, and at last you have succeeded. You bask in the glory, but then the fever comes. As you lie sweating, the bite on your cheek burning, do you think of the warning carved in stone? Do you wonder if Tutankhamun himself has reached out with invisible hands? Or do you tell yourself it is only bad luck? Even as your breath shortens and the darkness closes in, that single death gave the pharaoh's cursed teeth. It transformed a rumor into a global legend, one that still haunts us a century later. Lord Carnarvon's death was only the beginning. If one man had died, skeptics could dismiss it as bad luck. But what followed was a cascade of deaths, a pattern that the press devoured and the public could not ignore. Suddenly, the pharaoh's curse seemed to reach across oceans, claiming lives with an eerie patience. Consider George J. Gould, the wealthy American industrialist. He visited the tomb in early 1923, marveling at its treasures. Within days, he developed a fever. He returned to the French Riviera, but his health collapsed. He died not long after. Then there was Arthur Mace, a member of Carter's own excavation team, who suffered illness and died in 1928. Another, Richard Bethel, Carter's secretary, died suddenly at the age of 39. His father soon after threw himself from a building, muttering that his family was cursed. The list grew longer. Newspapers published it like a macabre scorecard: Lord Carnarvon, George J. Gould, Arthur Mace, Richard Bethel, and more. Each death was linked to Tutankhamun's tomb, regardless of the actual cause. People did not care about medical reports or accidents. They cared about the narrative. And the narrative was irresistible. Those who touched the pharaoh's rest were doomed. Imagine being Howard Carter in those years. Every time someone associated with the tomb died, reporters hounded him. "Do you fear the curse? Mr. Carter, do you believe you are next?" Carter, ever the stoic, dismissed it all as nonsense. Yet one wonders, when he lay awake at night, did he feel a chill? Did he imagine the boy king's golden mask watching him, smiling faintly at his defiance? Fear spreads faster than truth. Tourists flocked to Egypt not to avoid the curse, but to brush against it. To stand in the valley was to flirt with danger, to feel history's icy breath on your neck. For ordinary people, it was like living in a ghost story that had come alive. And this is the cruel genius of the curse legend. It did not need to kill everyone. Just enough. A handful of deaths, woven into a compelling story, was enough to create the illusion that the curse never missed its target. Each obituary became another stone in the pyramid of fear. So I ask you, if you saw friend after friend fall, if every cough, every fever, every unlucky accident seemed tied to a single tomb, would you still laugh it off as coincidence? Or would you start to wonder if, perhaps, the pharaoh truly had the last word? As the legend of the curse spread, scientists stepped in to challenge it. They asked, was it truly supernatural, or was there a rational explanation? After all, ancient tombs were sealed environments, undisturbed for millennia. Could they hide invisible killers more terrifying than any carved warning? One theory pointed to deadly mold spores, dormant for thousands of years on the walls and objects of the tomb. When disturbed, these spores could release toxins, causing respiratory illness, fever, and even death. Another theory blamed bacteria, strains that thrived in the dark, damp microclimate of the sealed chambers. A person with a weak immune system, already exhausted from the desert heat, could fall victim easily. Some scientists suggested poisonous gases: hydrogen sulfide, carbon monoxide, even ancient formaldehyde-like compounds might have built up inside. Imagine opening a chamber and breathing in that first lungful of air not touched since it was sealed with the king. To you it feels like dust, but to your body it is poison. And yet, these explanations never satisfied everyone. For one thing, not everyone who entered the tomb became ill. Howard Carter himself, who spent years cataloging its contents, lived nearly 2 decades afterward. If poison or bacteria were truly deadly, why did not they claim everyone equally? Skeptics argued that the deaths were random. People die every day. Linking them to a curse was like connecting stars into constellations. Patterns imposed on coincidence. But believers countered that coincidence itself was part of the curse's design. The pharaoh did not need to strike everyone. He needed only to strike enough to send fear rippling across the world. Think about your own instincts. If you walked into a sealed room, coughed from the dust, and later fell ill, would you trust the doctors who said it was infection? Or would you remember the hieroglyphs' warning of swift death and wonder if the curse had claimed you? Science can explain mold, bacteria, gases, but science cannot explain fear. Fear lingers in the imagination, feeding on doubt, growing stronger with every shadow in the tomb. And perhaps, in that sense, the scientists never truly defeated the curse. They only gave it a new mask, one that looked like biology, but felt just as deadly. The most unsettling idea of all was that the curse might not be mystical at all, but microbial. Invisible killers waiting patiently in the dark. To a modern mind, the thought is almost worse than magic. Magic is dramatic, personal. Microbes are silent, uncaring, inevitable. Picture the tomb sealed for 30 centuries. Inside, humidity from sealed jars, organic matter from flowers and food offerings, even the body itself created a hidden ecosystem. Mold grew on walls, fungi spread spores. Some of these fungi, like Aspergillus flavus, produce toxins powerful enough to damage the liver and lungs. Bacteria thrived in the damp plaster, Rodents and insects left behind droppings that carried disease. Over time, the tomb became a laboratory of decay, sealed shut, waiting for the first intruder to breathe it in. When Lord Carnarvon entered, he already had fragile health from past injuries. A mosquito bite alone might not have killed him, but combined with exposure to microbes, exhaustion and infection, it became deadly. Likewise, others who died may have been vulnerable, weakened by the desert climate and long journeys. The curse, then, might simply have been biology's revenge. But there is something eerie about this explanation. Think of it, the pharaoh did not need spells or gods. Time itself became his ally. His tomb was a weapon designed by accident. Sealed air, poisoned dust, deadly spores. What greater curse than to leave behind an environment lethal to the curious? And yet, not everyone succumbed. Carter survived. Many others lived long after their visit. Was it luck, stronger immune systems, or was it, as believers insisted, proof that the pharaoh chose who to punish? Here lies the unsettling paradox. Science says microbes killed some. Belief says the pharaoh killed others. Which frightens you more, the hand of an ancient king, or the breath of ancient dust crawling into your lungs? As you stand in that chamber, torchlight flickering, you cannot see them. You cannot hear them. But perhaps, with every breath, you are swallowing the pharaoh's curse. Not in myth, but in spores and poison. And whether you believe in gods or not, one truth remains: the dead are never entirely harmless. Every mystery walks a fine line between coincidence and intention. The pharaoh's curse is no different. Skeptics argue that every death linked to Tutankhamun's tomb can be explained. Carnarvon had poor health, Gould had a weak heart, Bethel suffered stress. Life in the 1920s was not kind to fragile bodies. People died young from infections and ailments that today we treat with simple medicine. But belief is stubborn. For every rational explanation, a chilling detail emerges. Carnarvon's mosquito bite was on the same spot as a lesion found on Tutankhamun's face. Gould died just days after leaving the tomb, as if the curse had followed him across the sea. Richard Bethel was found smothered in his bed. Hardly the work of bacteria or mold. Each coincidence felt too neat, too perfectly scripted to dismiss. Now imagine yourself as a visitor in that era. You pick up a newspaper, the headline screaming, "Another death in the pharaoh's shadow." You sip your morning coffee, and your hand trembles. If you were planning a trip to Egypt, would you cancel, or would you go anyway, half terrified, half thrilled at the idea of brushing against the supernatural? Coincidence is easy to accept when it happens once, twice perhaps, but 10 times, 20, at some point the human mind stitches patterns together. It whispers, this cannot all be random. And once that seed is planted, fear blooms like a weed. Believers leaned into this. They pointed to ancient inscriptions, stories of priests whispering curses over the tomb. They claimed the pharaoh's spirit lived on, choosing who to strike. Skeptics countered with probability, statistics, medical charts. But which argument do you think captured the imagination of the world? The dry logic of science, or the spine-tingling story of a king who refused to be forgotten? Ask yourself, if a friend of yours died mysteriously after entering a tomb, and then another, at what point would you stop saying coincidence and start whispering curse? To the ancient Egyptians, the curse was not merely superstition, it was divine law. The gods themselves were guardians of the dead, and they were not gentle. To disturb a pharaoh was to provoke the wrath of an entire pantheon. Picture Anubis, the jackal-headed god, standing tall in painted reliefs. Black fur gleaming, eyes cold. He was the embalmer, the guide of souls. His duty was to weigh your heart against the feather of truth. If your heart was heavy with sin, it was devoured by Ammit, the devourer, a monstrous mix of crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus. Oblivion awaited. Then Osiris, ruler of the underworld, green-skinned and regal, sat upon his throne. Once a king on earth, now he reigned over the dead. Pharaohs in death were believed to join him, becoming gods themselves. To violate their tombs was to trespass into the very court of Osiris. The walls of tombs told these stories in vivid colors. Gods standing guard with spears and whips, serpents breathing fire, rivers of knives through which the soul had to pass. To us, they look like mythology. To the Egyptians, they were warnings. This is the power that awaits intruders. Now imagine you are deep in the tomb, torchlight flickering, staring at these paintings. A serpent's fangs gleam at you from the wall. A god's eyes catch the light, staring back. You remind yourself it is only art, only pigment on stone. But why, then, does your skin prickle? Why do you feel judged, as though your own heart is already being weighed on Anubis's scales? Belief gives power. The more people feared the gods, the stronger the curse became in their minds. And even today, long after the old religion has faded, the images still unsettle. Anubis, Osiris, Ammit, they linger like shadows in our imagination. So I ask you, if you believed even a little that the gods themselves guarded the tomb, would you dare defy them? Or would you bow your head, whisper a prayer, and step back into the safety of the desert sun? The pharaohs did not only rely on gods and curses carved in stone. They relied on magic woven into their very bodies. To understand the power of their tombs, you must understand mummification, the ritual that promised immortality. Picture the scene: priests dressed in linen, chanting prayers, their hands steady as they worked. The body of the pharaoh lay before them, once powerful, now still. Yet to the Egyptians, he was not gone. He was in transition, moving from one state of being to another. Every step of the ritual mattered. The brain was removed through the nose with hooks. Organs were taken out, preserved in jars guarded by protective deities. The body was dried with natron salt until it became a vessel fit for eternity. Then it was wrapped in hundreds of yards of linen, each layer coated with resins and spells. Amulets were tucked between the wrappings. The Eye of Horus for protection, scarabs for rebirth, ankhs for life everlasting. For 70 days the ritual continued. 70 days of prayers, incense, chants. 70 days to transform a man into a god. When the wrappings were complete, the pharaoh's body was more than preserved. It was armed. To touch him, to disturb him, was to confront not a corpse, but a weapon of magic. Even the mask was more than decoration. Tutankhamun's golden mask, for example, was not just beautiful. It was inscribed with protective spells. It was meant to ensure that his spirit could see, breathe, and speak in the afterlife. Every detail was a safeguard against oblivion. Now imagine stepping into such a tomb. You shine your light on the sarcophagus. Beneath lies a body wrapped not just in cloth, but in centuries of faith. Do you dare lift the lid? Do you dare peel back the linen, knowing that with every layer, you are tearing through prayers and spells meant to protect eternity itself? The Egyptians believed that the body and soul were linked. If the body was disturbed, the soul could seek vengeance. Perhaps that is why curses seemed to follow intruders. The pharaoh was not merely a memory. He was present, his essence bound to the wrappings, waiting for the chance to punish. So tell me, if you found yourself staring at a mummy's face, golden mask gleaming, eyes painted to watch you forever, would you still call it superstition? Or would you whisper an apology, step back, and hope the pharaoh shows mercy? The Egyptians were master architects, and their tombs were more than resting places. They were battlegrounds against the living. While curses were meant to terrify the mind, the tomb itself was designed to break the body. Picture a thief centuries ago, creeping into the darkness with a torch in hand. His heart races as he imagines gold waiting ahead. He does not know that the passage is angled downward so sharply that a single misstep could send him tumbling into a pit. He does not realize that some ceilings were rigged with loose stones, ready to collapse if disturbed. In some cases, heavy doors were built to slam shut once opened, trapping the intruder forever. But here's the cruel brilliance. Many of these traps did not need to be physical at all. The tomb itself was a psychological weapon. Corridors bent at odd angles, leading to dead ends. Walls were painted with terrifying gods, serpents, and flames. Imagine you are lost in that maze, your torch sputtering, shadows dancing. Fear itself becomes the deadliest trap, causing panic, mistakes, and exhaustion. Even the very air could betray you. Sealed chambers sometimes held stale, oxygen poor air. Light a torch and suddenly it burns weakly, leaving you gasping in the dark. Imagine the terror of realizing that the tomb itself is suffocating you, as if the Pharaoh had placed his hand over your mouth. And then there was silence. In the desert above, you might hear wind or distant voices, but underground, nothing. Just the sound of your own heartbeat, magnified until it feels like the drums of doom. Alone in the dark, with paintings of gods promising vengeance, you begin to believe. The curse is no longer a rumor. It is a presence surrounding you. Think of how cunning this is. No guards were needed, no soldiers. The tomb itself defended its master. The architecture, the art, even the stale air, all conspired to convince intruders that they had entered a place where they did not belong. So let me ask you, if you found yourself deep in such a tomb, torch sputtering, lungs tight, shadows twisting on the walls, would you push forward toward treasure, or would you run, desperate to feel the sun again, before the stone swallowed you whole? Now let us take a step beyond history and into imagination. Suppose for one night you were locked inside a pharaoh's tomb. No guards, no archaeologists, no cameras, just you, your flashlight, and the silence of eternity. At first, you might try to be brave. You would walk slowly, letting your light scan the painted walls. Gods with jackal heads, serpents coiled in endless loops, stars painted across the ceiling. You would whisper to yourself that it is only art, only symbols. But the longer you look, the more those eyes seem to follow you. Every jackal grins. Every serpent hisses. The air is heavy, dry yet suffocating. You cough, the sound echoing too loud, bouncing back at you like a mocking laugh. The silence afterward presses in, reminding you that you are utterly alone. Even your footsteps sound wrong, too sharp, too final, like nails driven into a coffin. Then come the tricks of the mind. A shadow flickers at the edge of your light. You whirl, but nothing is there. A faint rustling in the corridor. Sand shifting, stone settling, but it sounds like footsteps. Your heart hammers. You tell yourself it is only the tomb settling. Yet the thought creeps in. What if it is not? Now imagine the hours stretching on. Midnight becomes 1, 1 becomes 2. Your flashlight grows dimmer. Batteries are not eternal, and neither is courage. The silence seems to grow teeth. You begin to wonder if the curse is not just about death, but madness, slow, creeping madness born of darkness and fear. Would you dare lie down and sleep? Could you close your eyes knowing that if you dream, the Pharaoh might step from his coffin, linen rustling, golden mask gleaming, to stand above you? Could you stand the thought of waking to find him waiting? This is why the curse endures. It is not only about those who died. It is about those who imagined death in the darkness and felt their courage melt. The tomb becomes a mirror showing you your own fear, and sometimes that fear is worse than any poison. So tell me, if tonight you were locked inside a tomb, would you emerge in the morning with steady breath and steady hands, or would you stumble out broken, whispering to the sun that you had seen the Pharaoh's curse with your own eyes? Fear is one thing in imagination. It is another when the earth itself seems to move against you. Many tombs in the Valley of the Kings were built with shafts filled with sand and rubble, designed to collapse and bury intruders. Over time, natural erosion has done the same. Walls crumble, ceilings sag, tunnels close. Imagine being inside when it happens. You walk down a narrow corridor, brushing your hand along cool limestone. Then, without warning, you hear a groan. Stone grinding against stone. Dust rains from above. Your torchlight catches a crack racing across the ceiling. The air fills with grit. Then, with a thunderous roar, part of the tunnel collapses. The sound is deafening, the force overwhelming. You cough, choking on sand, your ears ringing. Behind you, the way out is buried. Ahead, darkness thickens. Your heart pounds as you realize you are entombed, Not by priests, not by gods, but by the earth itself. Yet, in your panic, you remember the hieroglyphs. Warnings of swift death, promises of vengeance. And suddenly, the collapse feels less like geology and more like the pharaoh's hand pressing you into silence. This is not hypothetical. Archaeologists have died in cave-ins, crushed by tons of stone. Even modern explorers with helmets and lights face the same terror. One misstep, one shift in the sand, and the tomb closes like a mouth swallowing its prey. Now think of it from the ancient perspective. A thief enters, greedy for gold. The walls groan, the sand shifts, and he vanishes forever. The villagers whisper, the curse has claimed him. No one sees the collapse, no one records the physics. What survives is the story that the pharaoh reached out and dragged him down. Would you call it coincidence, or would you, too, whisper that the curse had come alive? In the end, whether by design or by nature, the effect is the same. The tomb swallows the living, and as the dust settles, silence returns, as if nothing had ever happened, except for the bones buried beneath. For every story of a death, there was another story of survival. And sometimes the survivors made the legend of the curse even stronger. After all, if everyone had perished, the curse might have been dismissed as simple danger. But the fact that some lived and lived long made people whisper that the pharaoh himself was choosing his victims. Howard Carter, the man who discovered Tutankhamun's tomb, lived until 1939, nearly 2 decades after the excavation. He handled treasures daily, cataloged artifacts, and breathed the same air that supposedly carried deadly spores. Yet he endured his life long and steady. How could that be? Unless the curse was selective, others, too, defied the curse. Lady Evelyn Herbert, daughter of Lord Carnarvon, was one of the first to step into the tomb. She survived and lived until 1980, reaching the age of 79. Many of Carter's team members lived into old age as well. This survival puzzled believers and skeptics alike. To believers, it was proof of choice, an invisible hand deciding who deserved punishment and who did not. To skeptics, it was proof that coincidence ruled, that biology and chance explained the deaths. But to the world, the pattern only deepened the mystery. The pharaoh, it seemed, was not a mindless killer. He was a judge. Now imagine being Carter in his later years, sitting by the fire in England, reading reports of friends who had died, hearing strangers whisper that you had been spared by the curse. Did he ever wonder why? Did he ever glance over his shoulder, expecting Tutankhamun's shadow to finally arrive? Survivors do not weaken a legend, they sharpen it. By living, they force the question, why them and not the others, and sometimes that unanswered question is more chilling than the deaths themselves. So think of it this way, if you were spared, if you walked out of the tomb alive while others did not, would you feel lucky, or would you live the rest of your life wondering when the pharaoh would come to collect his debt? Survival did not always mean escape. For many who lived, the curse clung in quieter ways. Strange accidents, lingering illnesses, nightmares that haunted them for years. These too became part of the pharaoh's shadow. Some archaeologists reported dreams of jackals prowling at their bedsides, or of golden masks staring at them in the dark. Others felt stalked by misfortune, accidents at home, sudden financial ruin, family tragedies. These were not as dramatic as death, but in some ways they were worse. A slow, invisible haunting, as though the pharaoh was patient, whispering, "I have not forgotten." Imagine the weight of that fear. You survive the tomb, but every cough reminds you of the spores. Every flicker of shadow recalls the hieroglyphs. You begin to wonder if survival was not a blessing, but a sentence, to live long under the curse, waiting for it to finally claim you. Even Carter was not immune. Though he lived long, his later years were filled with exhaustion, isolation, and illness. Some said the pharaoh had not killed him quickly, but had drained his life slowly, day by day. Superstition thrives on such stories. They turn ordinary hardships into evidence of the supernatural. And soon, the idea spreads, once you touch the pharaoh's tomb, you never leave it. His shadow clings to you, follows you across oceans, across years. Now imagine yourself. You left the tomb decades ago, yet every night you wake in a sweat, convinced that golden eyes are watching. You laugh it off to friends. But alone, in the quiet, the fear returns. Did you truly escape, or are you simply living in the Pharaoh's shadow, waiting for the moment he steps out of the dark? For all the science, for all the rational arguments, there remain events that defy explanation. Stories that refuse to fit neatly into coincidence or biology. And it is in these gaps that the Pharaoh's curse thrives. Take the case of the canary. Howard Carter kept a small pet bird during the excavation. Locals claimed that on the very day the tomb was opened, the bird was eaten by a cobra, the sacred symbol of Egyptian royalty. To them, it was a sign the pharaoh had struck, sending his serpent to claim the first victim. Was it chance or an omen? Or consider the lights of Cairo, which supposedly went out at the exact moment Lord Carnarvon died. Entire city blocks plunged into darkness. Electricity fails often, skeptics said, but believers pointed, at the very moment, such timing felt uncanny, almost theatrical, as if orchestrated by something beyond human. Then there were the dreams. Several workers reported visions of golden figures warning them to leave. One awoke screaming that the boy king stood at his bedside, pointing at him. Weeks later, he fell ill. No doctor could explain it. These are the stories science struggles with. They are not measurable, not testable, but they linger in memory and in whispers. And for many, they are more convincing than statistics. After all, the human mind is not swayed by numbers. It is swayed by stories. Now imagine hearing these tales as you prepare to enter a tomb. You adjust your helmet, your flashlight, and someone leans close to whisper. Did you hear about the canary? About the lights? About the dreams? Do you still walk forward boldly? Or does a sliver of doubt crawl into your heart? Perhaps that is the true power of the curse. Not in killing, but in making you question. Once doubt is planted, it grows. Every creak of stone, every flicker of shadow becomes a message. And whether or not the pharaoh reaches from the grave, you have already surrendered, your courage stolen by the possibility that he might. By the 20th century, the pharaoh's curse had escaped the tombs and entered the bright lights of Hollywood. Filmmakers, ever hungry for spectacle, seized on the legend and turned it into entertainment. The curse became not just a whispered tale of archaeologists and deserts, but a cultural icon, one that still shapes how we imagine Egypt today. It began in the 1930s when The Mummy was released. Boris Karloff, wrapped in bandages, shuffled across the screen, eyes burning with undead fury. The story was pure invention, but audiences believed it carried a kernel of truth. After all, had not real men died after disturbing Tutankhamun's tomb? The movie was a hit, and soon Mummy's curse was cemented in the public imagination. Since then, countless films, comics, and cartoons have reimagined the curse. Sometimes the mummy rises to strangle intruders. Sometimes it commands legions of sandstorms or plagues. Always, though, the message is the same: disturb the pharaoh and you pay the price. Think about what this says about us. We love to be afraid, but in safe doses. We sit in theaters, popcorn in hand, as the bandaged figure lurches across the screen. We laugh at cheesy effects, yet a part of us wonders, what if curses are real, hidden beneath sand and stone? And so Hollywood gave the pharaoh a second life. The curse no longer belonged only to dusty tombs. It lived in posters, matinee shows, Saturday cartoons. Children grew up playing with toy mummies, humming adventure themes, dreaming of treasure hidden under pyramids. The legend spread farther than Egypt ever could. But here's the irony. By making the curse into spectacle, we made it immortal. Pharaohs who once ruled a narrow river valley now reign in movie theaters across the globe. Tutankhamun's mask became as famous as Dracula's cape or Frankenstein's bolts. The curse, in Hollywood's hands, became entertainment, but also eternity. So ask yourself, when you see a mummy in a film, do you laugh at the bandages? Or do you feel a chill, knowing that behind the fiction lies a real story of tombs, death, and a king who still refuses to be forgotten? When mysteries linger too long, new theories creep in to fill the silence. For the Pharaoh's curse, some have turned not to gods or microbes, but to aliens. It may sound absurd, but entire books, documentaries, and late-night radio shows have claimed that the tombs of Egypt are more than graves. They are evidence of visitors from the stars. According to these theories, the precision of the pyramids, the astronomical alignments of temples, and the sudden rise of Egyptian civilization are too advanced to explain with human hands alone. The pharaohs, then, were not merely kings but hybrids, rulers infused with alien knowledge. Their curses were not spells but technologies. Biological weapons, sound frequencies, radiation left behind in the tombs. Imagine stepping into a chamber where hieroglyphs glow faintly under ultraviolet light, revealing patterns that look less like writing and more like circuitry. Imagine discovering a sarcophagus that hums softly, as if resonating with frequencies we cannot hear. To believers, these are not fantasies but clues. The curse, they argue, is the residue of alien science, misunderstood as magic by the ancients. Of course, mainstream scholars scoff. They point to human genius, to the labor of thousands, to centuries of trial and error. Yet the alien theory refuses to die. Why? Because it offers something irresistible, the sense that the pharaohs were not only rulers of Earth, but ambassadors of something cosmic. Think about it. A curse that kills across oceans, across years. A mask that seems to gaze with inhuman calm. Temples aligned with stars. To some, this feels less like coincidence and more like design. And design, in their view, points upward. Now, whether you laugh or lean forward in curiosity, the theory reveals something important. We crave explanations bigger than ourselves. If gods no longer satisfy, we turn to galaxies. If magic feels too simple, we invent technology beyond comprehension. The Pharaoh's curse, in this light, becomes more than superstition. It becomes a riddle of the universe itself. So I ask you, if one night you walked into a tomb and found, carved deep in stone, a map of the stars with a trail leading to Earth, would you still say the curse was myth? Or would you wonder if, long ago, the pharaohs were keeping secrets not only of life and death, but of the cosmos? Fear and death are heavy subjects, but even the darkest legends sometimes carry a strange humor, dark, uncomfortable, yet irresistible. The Pharaoh's curse is no exception. Reporters in the 1920s often wrote about the curse with a mix of horror and wit. Cartoons showed mummies chasing terrified archaeologists. One headline joked, "Tutankhamun's revenge, apply within." Tourists bought trinkets labeled cursed, laughing nervously as they carried them home. Even today, gift shops sell mummy dust in tiny jars, promising bad luck to whoever opens them. This humor is not an accident. It is a way for us to handle fear. We joke because we cannot look death in the eye for too long. Quip, a cartoon. A nervous laugh, it gives us distance from the horror. It makes the curse feel like a story, not a threat. But there is something eerie about laughter echoing through a tomb. Imagine standing in the Valley of the Kings, surrounded by cliffs, and hearing someone laugh loudly at a joke about the curse. The sound bounces off stone, sharp and out of place. It almost feels like the pharaoh himself is laughing with you or at you. Dark humor has always thrived around death. Soldiers in trenches joke about their chances. Doctors make grim puns in hospitals. Archaeologists, too, laughed as they worked among the dead. Yet beneath the jokes lay unease, a knowledge that death was always listening. So here is the irony. The pharaoh's curse both terrifies and entertains. It makes us laugh even as it chills us. And maybe, just maybe, that is part of its power. Because a curse that can make you laugh still lingers in your mind long after the punchline fades. So tell me, when you laugh at the idea of a mummy's curse, are you mocking it, or are you, without realizing, joining the chorus of the dead, whose laughter echoes from stone corridors in the dark? The pharaoh's curse, at its heart, is not only about death. It is about a bargain. The pharaohs promised their people eternity, but eternity always demands a price. Gold, labor, prayer, even fear, something must be given so that something might last forever. Think about the thousands of workers who toiled in the Valley of the Kings. They carved walls, painted stars, sealed corridors. They gave their sweat, their years, sometimes their lives, to secure the Pharaoh's afterlife. In return, they believed Egypt itself would endure, protected by the gods and by the king who became one of them. Now think about us. We are not building tombs, but we tell stories. We keep the Pharaoh alive by speaking his name, by repeating his curse. That is our bargain. He grants us wonder, chills, the thrill of the supernatural. We pay him back with memory, with fear, with fascination. In this way, he has achieved what every ruler dreams of: immortality through us. Perhaps that is the real curse. Not the deaths, not the microbes, not the collapsing tunnels. The real curse is that once you encounter the Pharaoh, you cannot forget him. He haunts you in books, in films, in late-night thoughts. He claims space in your imagination, and there he reigns forever. So ask yourself, when you whisper about Tutankhamun, when you laugh at mummy jokes, when you shiver at a shadow in a hallway, are you paying the Pharaoh his due? Are you keeping the bargain that binds the living to the dead? Every story needs a climax, and for the Pharaoh's curse, it is this: you cannot escape. No matter how many scientists explain, no matter how many skeptics dismiss, the legend follows, because escape is not about leaving the tomb. It is about leaving the idea, and that is impossible. Consider how many centuries have passed since the Valley of the Kings was sealed. Pharaohs themselves are dust, their kingdoms long gone. Yet here you are, thousands of years later, listening to his story, feeling the same chill as those who first whispered of the curse. The Pharaoh is still here, because you are still thinking of him. Even if you never set foot in Egypt, the curse has reached you. Through books, films, memes, conversations at dinner tables, late-night documentaries. You carry it in your imagination. You tell it to friends. You pass it on to children. In this way, the curse spreads wider than any plague. Now imagine this: you dream tonight, and in your dream you walk into a tomb. You see the golden mask gleam. You hear sand shifting behind you. You wake with your heart racing, sweat on your brow, and you realize the Pharaoh has followed you even into sleep. That is the genius of the curse. You do not need to believe in it for it to work. It works the moment you wonder, even for a second, what if it is real? That thought is enough to bind you. The Pharaoh does not need to kill you. He only needs to be remembered. So let me ask you, do you feel safe now? Or do you, even faintly, feel the weight of eyes watching, the whisper of a king who refuses to be forgotten? And now, at last, we return to silence. The Pharaoh lies in his tomb, wrapped in linen, face hidden behind gold. The desert night is still, stars wheeling overhead. For thousands of years, he has slept. The question is, does he sleep still? You have walked with me through history, through science, through superstition. You have seen the tombs carved deep in stone, the curses etched in hieroglyphs, the deaths that shook the world. You have breathed the dust, felt the fear, laughed at the jokes, and wondered about aliens. And now you must decide what you believe. Maybe the curse is nothing but microbes and accidents. Maybe it is coincidence spun into myth. But maybe, just maybe, it is something older, something patient, something watching. Maybe the Pharaoh, in his way, is still king. If that thought unsettles you, then the curse has worked. It does not need proof. It only needs your imagination. Before we part, I want to thank you for walking this path with me, for daring to listen, for letting the Pharaoh's story breathe again. If you enjoyed this journey, take a moment to like this video, to subscribe, to tell me in the comments, what do you believe? Is the curse real, or is it only in our minds? And tell me, too, what story you wish to hear next. The Pharaoh sleeps, or does he? That answer, my friend, is now yours to decide.